So in this story this morning, the king was David, the greatest king that ever lived in Israel. King was not without his faults, as we discussed in our Sunday school class earlier today, but yet the Bible tells us that he was a man after God's own heart. David took over the kingdom after Saul, the first king of Israel, and Saul had died in battle. Saul had a son named Jonathan. Jonathan also died in that same battle. Jonathan would have taken control after his father, but he also died in that same battle. Now, Jonathan and David were best friends growing up. They were boyhood friends. And I'm adding a little conjecture here, but I assume as boyhood friends, they probably did some of the things that boys normally did growing up together. They played pranks on their neighborhood kids. They stayed up late at night talking about and dreaming about the future, probably talking about girls. That's what guys do. And then they were talking and dreaming about hunting and fishing and about fast chariots and fast horses. Jonathan even saved David's life at one time. David, of course, couldn't be more thankful than that. Now, Jonathan was dead. And after a series of events that we read about in 1st and 2nd Samuel, David became the king of Israel. David was a good king. David was a kind king. And he was a grateful king. One day, David was reminiscing about his friendship with Jonathan. And he was thinking back at all the good times that they had together. And David remembered that shortly before Jonathan had saved his life, he made a request of David. Now, the request was made because Jonathan knew full well that God's hand was on David and that David would one day become the king over Israel. And as such, he would be replacing Jonathan's father, King Saul. And as was the custom in those days, when somebody took over a throne of a previous king, normally what would happen would be all that king's descendants, the previous king's descendants, would be put to death in order so that there wouldn't be any threat against the throne. And so Jonathan, knowing that, made a request of David. He says in 1 Samuel chapter 20, verses 14 and 15, "And you shall not only show me the kindness of the Lord while I still live, that I may not die, but you shall not cut off your kindness from my father's house forever. No, not when the Lord has cut off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth." So David determined that it was time to fulfill that promise that he had made to Jonathan. And he went into the servant, looked for the servant who had worked for King Saul, and he asked the servant, "Is there anyone that is still alive from Saul's family?" And the servant told David that there was a grandson who was still alive. And that grandson was also a son of Jonathan. Now, Jonathan was Saul's son, and Mephibosheth was Jonathan's son. Now, Mephibosheth, there's that name that you don't hear very often. How many of you have named a grandchild Mephibosheth? I have 6 grandchildren altogether. I have almost 10 great-grandchildren, 9 so far. Number 10 is going to be born next month, and his name has already been selected. It's Owen Dakota Witham. And so I've yet to see a Mephibosheth in our family. And I have to say, I couldn't be more thankful than that. Mephibosheth is kind of a weird name. But Mephibosheth was this grandson of Saul. So the servant said to David, "There is a descendant. You might want to know something about him, though. Well, how can I put this?" He says, he's lame in both of his feet. In other words, he can't walk very fast, if he can walk at all. He's probably dependent upon crutches. He can't run. He can't do much or anything. He won't be of any use to you or any value to you. He's really not worth much. Just thought you should know, okay? His name is Mephibosheth.